Hi, my name is Audrey McKinnon. I'm 38 years old, and just 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. It's a diagnosis I suspected since high school, almost as long as I wondered if I might be autistic too. But I'm not the typical stereotype of either, and just like many other girls, I was easy to miss. I almost failed art in grade 3 because of a crumpled up assignment I tried to take home and finish, then didn't, but I was easy to miss. I barely finished high school with 1% in English and 49% in math just weeks before the final credits were due, but I was easy to miss. I changed jobs, careers, and apartments as if change was water and crisis was air, but I was easy to miss. Just like many girls, I was found to be depressed and anxious or just dismissed in the doctor's office. In the real world, I was lazy, disorganized, and weird at best. At worst, I was a problematic, burnt-out employee and alcoholic, and as a consequence for my impulsive decisions and misjudgments, there were times I was homeless and hungry. Like many girls my age, just finding out they meet the criteria for ADHD, autism, or both. Only now, after decades of shame for failing so badly within the framework of neurotypical expectations, like many girls my age, I was misdiagnosed, dismissed, or missed altogether. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's a collection of stories to start correcting the narrative about ourselves because we deserved better. And it's not too late to start now. I feel like we should start in the beginning, which is, just like the last time that you and I saw each other was like 5 or 6 years ago, and we were working together at CBC. So it must have been 6 years ago or even more because it's been like that long since I worked there in Prince George. And did you, like, you're now diagnosed with ADHD?
Yeah.
Were you back then?
No, I wasn't. No.
Okay.
My grad degree and my internships, and it wasn't until as many people experienced, it wasn't until COVID that sort of came.
Okay. So neither of us knew that we had ADHD at the time. Okay, before I get into like how you got diagnosed and stuff like that, let's just do a little exercise and think back to that period of time and like, do you think it was obvious?
I think what's interesting is that I really got along with you. And
yeah.
we're obviously at the time the only female in the office. So that was one aspect of it, right? But I just, like, your personality, I was naturally attracted to you. I just felt like we bounced well off of each other. I thought your teaching style, like when you were mentoring me, your mentoring style was really effective for me. And
we like naturally kind of understood each other, I think.
I think so. Yeah. I think, like I said, I wouldn't have put it down at the time to like struggling with the same, right, neurodivergence. But I think I definitely thought like, she is my people. Like, and even, you were just so generous with, not just with your time at CBC, but like inviting me out to things. I didn't, I had some family in Prince George, but I didn't know a lot of people. I think you kind of knew that. And so it was like something that I think is pretty unique in terms of like, right, relationship building. And I think that's very much an ADHD thing, is like really, a lot of us are, people. And I think kind of recognize too when someone maybe feels a bit on the outside and needs that attention. And so, yeah, that's one thing
that is 100% something that, like, I don't know if I've really talked about it much before, but it's like something I've known inside myself for a long time, that like, because I was such an outcast for so long as a kid and growing up, when I like kind of figured out how to socialize and how to like be in different areas, I started like picking up on, I would always notice the person who was like, maybe didn't look like they had like enough people around them, or like didn't know how to like join the conversation or whatever it was. And I've always like felt like, okay, like I recognize that. I want to make sure that person feels like they have an entry point into the conversation, because I know how it feels.
Yeah.
It's you need like, it's like, I love it when somebody rescues me from that situation. So I probably recognize that you didn't have as many like people to hang out with or whatever, because you were new and wanted to make sure you felt included.
Yeah, and I mean, you did a good job at that, especially like I said, I was only there, I think, for what, 6 or 7 weeks, not even, maybe 6 weeks. And so I remember thinking like, this is so nice of her to like invite me out to things and to like to do that, because um, it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily part of the like internship portion. It was just you being you, and but let's do this. And yeah, I really look back fondly on that, and I think like for sure in my kind of time doing my other internships as well, you've always stood out as someone who I just really admire.
Aw.
Whether or not that's because, like I said, we have that commonality, or just I really loved the way that you instructed and kind of guided me. And once again, I think now that I know I have ADHD, I need very explicit instructions, right? And so the
Yes.
way that you did it, maybe you naturally kind of guided me based on how you would learn as well. But that unknowingly was actually extremely helpful for me. And I think it was the level of patience you also had. And I know you were new at CBC at one point. Obviously, like you also had to learn, but
Yeah.
as you can relate to the level of anxiety that you get in those kind of jobs, and once again, I kind of relate that now to my ADHD, is like the anxious part of it, like coming in, and I think imposter syndrome is real for a lot of people. I think
Mhm.
it heavier weight on people with ADHD. It's much more present, I believe, from my experience,
Yeah.
and way more kind of, um, yeah, because you're always worried that the people are going to find out that you can't, right, that you can't do the job, or that you're not
Yeah.
accomplish the task, like that you're constantly waiting for someone to say, oh, right, like,
You've done it wrong, you dropped the ball.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. Um, and let's also like clarify to people who are watching or listening that um that the environment that we were in as well, that's like a super fast paced, intense, really scary environment, probably for anyone who's coming in new. But I do remember it being like quite an adjustment period when I first started at CBC, because it's just so much. And even every time there was like a new skill, it's like the new skill you're learning is court reporting. Like, terrifying. There's like rules, there's contempt of court, there's your note taking has to be perfect and all that kind of stuff, and you don't know what's going to happen when you get there. And then when you get out of the courtroom, you have to phone in your voice or whatever, your like little report, and your details have to be completely accurate. There's all that pressure, and the product you're producing is like, it's due the same day a lot of the time. It airs in front of tens of thousands of people, including your bosses. Like every level of boss can listen to it. The pressure is like immense on anyone. And then when you've got ADHD at the same time, it's like there's all this added pressure of like, what have I forgotten? What have I misunderstood? And I think also like emotional dysregulation comes into it as well. Like you want to stay at a place where you are regulated, because if you're not, it can just become like really overwhelming very quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, and actually I remember a time that our the director at the station had kind of instructed me to do something, and I kind of understood what he was asking for, but I really, and I was a little bit too nervous to ask, because now again I can reflect on the fact that that's just part of innately who I am, and what I was used to growing up as well, is like, and I can actually speak about that too. I have all my childhood report cards, which really, really pull on what ADHD is like as a child. Um, but I struggle to ask for help when I need it, because I've
Yeah.
in the past. And so I remember I sat down at the computer and like kind of was doing it. And it's not that I didn't want to do the task, it was that I just didn't understand necessarily what I was trying to do. And
Hmm.
so it was over, and he was like, "You're still working on this?" And I was really embarrassed,
Yeah.
obviously, but also didn't know how to express like, it's not that I am lazy, or that I'm not, wanting to work on this. It's that I just didn't really fully understand what you're looking for. And didn't want to ask more. Like, how do you say that to a boss, right? Like, oh, that just makes me feel like I'm not, I'm stupid. I'm not capable enough. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and
Yeah.
it's hard because I know that I'm a hard worker when I need to be a hard worker, but it has to be things that I feel confident about. And again, I wish I'd recognized at the time why that was the way I was approaching that task, but it's been with many tasks over my lifetime, right?
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so it was definitely a moment of like I felt like a bit of a failure in that instant, and like
Hmm.
I'm not this. I can't even do a simple thing that someone's asked me to do. So yeah, that was definitely one
Because
of
the
the.
instructions weren't entirely clear to you in that moment. I want to hear about the childhood report cards, how that connects to that.
Yeah, so my mom is like keeps everything, which is pretty incredible. And I have actually poured over my childhood report cards. Anytime I go home to visit, I just find it funny to look at them and uh, drawings. She's kept a bunch of, right. She's literally actually not even. I have two full albums of like childhood stuff that my mother has kept, and she has 4 kids, so she's done this for all of us, which is kind of crazy. And so I don't know at what point I started. I think it was when I started reading about child like symptoms for little girls, right, and how they differ from boys. That I read back over them, and it was the first time that it was almost like they were popping out of the page, right? Like, and it was everything from, she can only retain one. This is starting from kindergarten, from junior kindergarten.
Wow.
You know, one instruction at a time. We have to repeat to her that she has to hang up her coat and boots. Kallan is stuck daydreaming a lot and doesn't complete the tasks at hand. She's very chatty and fails to complete tasks because she's busy socializing. We're trying to get her to work on that, and there's numerous examples of that throughout, really, like starting from the age of 4 up until my high school report cards. Which the nice thing about the record keeping then too is that teachers actually wrote real comments then, right? Like now it's, I think, just pick and choose, like we'll listen, we'll not listen. But when I was in kindergarten up to grade 4, it was all handwritten, personalized, and there was a shift once we got to high school, and then it was literally just the tick boxes,
Mhm.
and work on A, B, and C. But definitely the attention to detail was one that permeated throughout my entire youth. Um, yeah, and just never
And,
stood out to anyone obviously as abnormal. It was just, here's this little girl stuck in her own world.
and tell me how you internalized that, because you talk about how, later on when you and I are working together at CBC, you have that experience, and you feel that, by not understanding something, that it's a personal failure. Is that the internalization that comes from that kind of, thread all throughout school?
I think so. I think because, and I've talked to other women who have been diagnosed. I've done a lot of research myself as a journalist. Obviously, I
Mhm.
also deep dive into things, and so I kind of went down that rabbit hole. But I feel like from what I guess when I think about my personal experiences and when I've talked to other people, is this idea of you're always trying your hardest, but it's never good enough because in your head you can't do any more. Like you've reached your maximum, you're putting all you can into it, and yet it's still not what they're looking for. And so um, I feel like when I think about, fast forwarding to being in a career, it's like my capacity is only so much. But even for one of my first jobs, I was the only person who would ever stay late at the office because I would kind of struggle to get things done during the day and then hit that little stride where I could just like pummel everything out. Everyone else would go home at 5 and I would stay late. And I think that's when they talk about the ADHD tax, like I would stay late and not get paid for it, but
Yeah.
you're making up for some of those hours maybe that you didn't work as hard. But also it's this idea of like all of a sudden you just kind of get that push or that moment where it's like, okay, yes, I can, I'm going to be able to hammer out this, and this. Um, but I've always put tasks that I find challenging on the backboard. I've always, if someone gives me instructions and says, I need you to do this, I can remember a few different incidences in my working life where my bosses had to say to me, like, where is that thing? And
Yeah.
it was because I couldn't, I just didn't, again, I didn't have enough instruction, or I didn't understand it enough. And I do remember specifically my first boss saying to me, you need to ask for more help. That's what she said. She's like, you
Right.
need help if you don't understand something. And that, I think, really goes back to that childhood, because I was reprimanded for it, right? I was
Yeah.
reprimanded, constantly asking for help. And
Yeah.
instead, bad thing. So,
I experienced the exact same thing. My very first job, I was a cashier, and I didn't know what I was doing was wrong, but I just kept getting, like, I need so many explicit instructions in the beginning. I now contextualize it as like, I need to know everything. I like to see the whole picture. I need to understand everything, kind of like in a deeper level. And the reason why, and it's probably infuriating for other people, but it takes me a long time to take in all the information. And then once I know it, I'm really good at what I learn. And people, at that point, everybody forgets how long it took me to learn. Now I contextualize that when I start a new job or a new project or something. I say, like, it might be annoying to you at first. I'm going to ask so many questions. But when I know it, you're going to be so glad you answered them. And that gives people that patience. But I didn't know that before. My first job, I was a cashier, and I kept needing help. I kept asking for help, and I'm weeks in, and I'm getting stuck on different steps and asking the manager, can you come help me? Can you come help me? And not able to kind of figure it out on my own. And I remember hearing through the grapevine, somebody kind of whispering to somebody else that the manager had complained that I asked for too much help and I need to start figuring things out on my own. And that was like such a like weight of like personal failure, shame, like embarrassment. And that is like, I think the moment that I internalize, like, oh, when I'm struggling and I don't understand the instructions, or I don't know what to do on the next step, like, I can't just ask for unlimited help. I need to figure it out on my own, which sends me into a panic. And then I end up kind of where you were when you're describing that event at CBC during your internship, where you're sitting there in freeze state, unable to do anything, and you get in trouble for that too. It's not good.
yeah, right? Because it's like do or don't. If you don't do it, then you fail at the task because you didn't. And then, like you said, if you do it, there are some people who are going to be like, can they not perform on their own, right? Like the
Yeah.
independent worker, is that something that I now need to put more energy into? Absolutely, I think it's definitely a struggle.
Do you approach those situations differently now that you're diagnosed?
Yes and no. I would say I think about them differently. Um, I feel like, so maybe I can talk about the moment that I was like, there's something not right. So I had gone just before COVID had happened. I had um, gone abroad with an international organization who was asking me to do some writing for them. So it was just a month-long project. I had a videographer with me. I was the writer. So we got all of these recordings, to transcribe into stories. I came back, COVID. So this was literally, a week before, 2 weeks before everything just shut down. So got back. So my task at hand, I was at that point kind of freelancing and also waitressing. So my waitressing job, obviously, you know, got let go from that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have anything going on. So really, I had all the time in the world to focus on these stories. I wasn't given any deadlines. They just said, get it to us when you can, write us these stories. And I could not bring myself to sit down and start transcribing or writing. And it was like, it was just like, and it was kind of, again, it was a weird point in time because there was a shift. I had moved up to Prince George actually to live with my sister because I couldn't afford to stay in Vancouver. So I was
Mm-hmm.
staying with her. So, it was a change of environment. I kind of just tried to put it down to all these like things of, well, my life's been, shaken up a little bit because of COVID. I'm not in my normal space. Um, but it was like days and days went by, and then a month went by, and then, I'd get an email being like, hey, where's the content? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm getting it to you. And I was in charge of deciding what stories to publish. Like, I kind of was running my own schedule in that sense, and what content. Um, but I think not having definitive parameters around deliverables, but also being in a space where I just was like, I don't understand why it's so hard for me to just sit down and do this. It's
Mm-hmm.
not hard. It's something I'm good at, and yet I could not do it. And so I think that was the moment where I was like, because again, it was embarrassing, because I was like, I'm a, I know I'm a good worker. I know I produce good stuff, but I have to email and be like, yeah, I'll get that to you. Now I recognize, like, if you don't give me a deadline, you're not getting it. Sorry, but like, you need to be more firm. I shouldn't say it too. Like, I need someone to say, please get it to me, or set my own deadline and saying, I will get it to you by this date. Please
Yeah.
follow up. Right? Like, there needs to be accountability for me, to be able to say, like, yep, that's something that I will, in fact, deliver. Um, but it was a weird moment because, like I said, when you have all these other factors too, and you're like kind of playing it through your head, being like, well, it's this and this and this. So yeah, up to that point, it hadn't even occurred to me, right, that I was actually struggling with something else.
Yeah. I have like recently actually been, because I'm right now off my medication. I'm gonna say I'm like in between medications right now. And I think probably temporarily. But I was just yesterday thinking like, why is it so hard for me to sit down and do this work that I need to do? There's some things that I need to like get done on my list. And I'm running my own business right now. So like, I'm really only accountable. I mean, I'm accountable to my clients as well, but the stuff that I'm trying to do, I'm accountable to myself. And I'm like just trying to like analyze my life and all of these different components and everything. And I finally yesterday admitted to my husband. I was like, I think I'm suffering from the symptoms of ADHD. He's like, yeah, you are. Like, of course you are. But it's like so simple, right? And it actually just putting it into that context made
Yeah.
it like, oh, okay, I've seen this hill before. And I know that there are certain things that can help with this. And I just have to choose some different solutions to it. Do I gamify it? Do I need to make my office more dopamine rich? That's my dog. Peanut, peanut, peanut butter. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Calm down. Okay. Are you done barking? Okay. Okay. Sit down. Sit down. No. He's got that little like, he can't stop barking. He's like can't help himself. He's like
Yeah.
ruff, ruff. Okay, he's done. Um but yeah, like these kind of questions myself that I know are like potential solutions. Or do I need to like, start thinking about getting back on my medication? Or I'm working on some different ideas of how I can solve that. Whereas before I would have just kind of floundered and internalized more internal like personal failure of like I'm just not able, or like I'm not good at this, or I don't know, trying to like just floundering forever until I think knowing it's ADHD just helps you, you're identifying the root of the problem.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I mean, as you know, and as you're making this podcast, like, it's pretty remarkable to think how many of us, and honestly, it's not just women. My brother has not been fully diagnosed, but he probably might, it's in my family. My brother also is more in the inattentive stream, not the hyperactive.
Oh.
And I think, whereas women present a certain way, I also believe there's also a slew of inattentive men that were missed because they don't fall into that, right? They don't fall into that kind
Mhm.
of box as well. Um, but I feel like, what's interesting, I ended up, when I found kind of my report cards and I wanted to sort of highlight what was going on. So I created my first TikTok and then posted it to my Instagram. Um, and I just kind of talked about some of the symptoms that women experience that are unknown. Um, And I had a couple people reach out, but I guess one of the more impactful ones was someone that I went to university with who messaged me, and she just said, like, hey, and this is just like my Instagram is just my personal followers, right? This is only like, who knows how many people
Mhm.
saw it, really like a smaller pool of people than if it was, you know, a bigger audience, obviously. Um, but yeah, this one woman reached out to me and she said, like, I saw your reel and like everything just clicked and I just got a diagnosis and like I can't thank you enough because I had no idea that's what was going on. Um, and I like that really made me feel good to know that like I just kind of posted it as an education piece.
Mhm.
Um, but even the fact that she wanted to reach out and say something, like I don't like probably another ADHD thing. I hate taking credit for things, or I don't like. I'm not someone who likes accolades. Like I like them in the way of like it makes me feel good, but it's hard to kind of pump myself up, right? But in that instant, I was like, oh, I'm glad that that was able to help someone that just by me sharing this is my experience and that's the power I think to more and more women coming and even girls sharing their experiences is that for every person that shares, someone out there is like, holy crap, I didn't understand that that's me. Um, and it's not just good for us; it's good for our partners and our relationships, and for everyone to understand. Like, I really don't think my partner and I would have a relationship, right? Like, we wouldn't be able to manage our relationship if he didn't know about my ADHD. I think that
Really?
yeah, I think that's a very key component to our because we kind of have to. I shouldn't say that. I think we would manage, but I think it would be much more difficult because he takes on a lot of the cooking. He takes on a lot of the house chores. And for someone with ADHD, like I've always, I mean, and I'm not going to say this is a synonymous thing. I'm not suggesting that everyone struggles with that. I think it's commonplace that it's like
Mhm.
overwhelming, right? Like keeping your house clean is overwhelming. It's a lot of those things. And so he's really stepped up, but also I think him understanding my diagnosis has made it less of a I don't want to say like there's no less of a bitterness, but like there's not so much of a like, well, I'm doing all this. Like he understands. He's like, I understand that you struggle with these things, and we're trying to come up with solutions to make sure that both of us feel like we're not just that we're actually running a household together, right?
Yeah, and he's not just thinking, "Oh, she's lazy," because that would
Exactly.
be the alternative, right? If there's like no like legitimate reason somebody can put to it. I mean, they're kind of lazy when they do this, but they think you're lazy or whatever, right? Or it's some kind of moral failure of yourself. But
Exactly.
yeah, I think I find that helpful as well, being able to communicate about that. And I mean, also just in I think identifying our own kind of our needs as well and admitting that to ourselves, because I think previously I would probably have pushed myself harder to please people in those areas where like maybe I don't have the executive functionings a certain day to accomplish certain things around the house, and I previously would have like pushed myself to fit into that box and make it work. But then I'm like, I start developing resentment and burnout and all of those kinds of things as well. So it can even come out in really indirect ways, even if you do kind of like push yourself to accomplish all of those things and meet your partner halfway or more. Um, you're not advocating for yourself, and you have to show up for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually question for you because I've
Hmm.
talked, have you gone through any sort of like grieving stage for the former you or the person that you could have been?
A grieving stage. I think I went through. Um, I went through period. I think I did, and I'll tell you what kind of um, helped me move past that was actually a conversation with my mom, because I think I was feeling like, couldn't my parents have one of my parents had done more, had identified it, and had known how to kind of like treat me during those times and had arrived in the way that I needed them to. And I'll say also, like, I have the best mom, but like she didn't know how to help me with certain needs with my ADHD. And undiagnosed, but like I suspect I'm on the autism spectrum as well. So um I I definitely had those thoughts, and I brought them up to my mom, and we had this deep conversation about it and everything. But like she told me, she knew that there was something different about me, and that I was struggling, that my parents definitely like worried about me and struggled with that and everything. But she was working, or she had gone through nursing school in the 90s, and she had, been in the psych wards and all that kind of stuff during her training for nursing. And she also like, went through all of that training about mental health. And she was like, in the 90s, like, the way they treated people who were different and had mental health issues and differences, all that kind of stuff. She was like, it wasn't, it looked like an experiment to me. And she was afraid to put me through that. And I think that helped me kind of feel like, you know, it's okay that I arrived to it when I did, because there's so much information now, and we're in a much more accepting world than we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So in that way, maybe I'm even a little grateful that I didn't know. And I think I moved through some of that grieving process because of that. But I do want to hear about yourself. Like, is that I'm assuming that's something that you went through as well, if you brought it up.
Well, I asked because I've heard other people, especially having kind of that process. Because I go through a lot of like research on my own, right? Kind of reading about people's experiences. I think I don't know if so. I think in a way, rather than a grieving process, I go through periods of just really big frustration where I'm like, why is this my brain? Why do I think like this? Why can't I just be normal? Which, on the flip side of it, I think as a creative, I'm drawn to, right? Like I like change. I think this is why they say a lot of people with ADHD, are journalists, are nurses, or they are like follow paths. They get variety. They can actually, right? Like police officers, like there's all of these different paths that I think tend to be more commonplace for men and women.
Yeah.
But I think because I have, two neurotypical sisters, I kind of see how they function. And like even just this weekend they were visiting and we were talking about how I'm like the really, I'm the emotional one. I'm the one that needs like attention, and also I need like physical touch is important to me, whereas they're both more like they're not like that, right? And whether or not that's like an ADHD trait or just, symptomatic of me growing up in a household where I needed more and my sisters weren't able to give that to me, if that makes sense. Like yeah, I think was a hypersensitive kid. And I'm still like, when you talk about emotional regulation, that's another thing with my partner we've had to work through, because I have big emotions and they come
Yeah.
out, and it's once again, as an adult, I'm like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I just like so over the top with this? And thankfully my partner has really learned how to, again, manage that in a way that's productive for both of us. And I'm super grateful for that, because it is a lot. Like I can be like, I admit it. Like sometimes I'm like, I'm a lot. Yeah. But, but, I, at the same time, I also think that some of the traits that I have, are some of the reasons that I have such a wide friend circle. And so I have so many people in my life that I'm close to. Um, and maybe, I don't know, I think this is where it gets kind of like, you're like, what's my personality and what's my ADHD? Is ADHD my personality? Like, like and that's the weird thing to me, is kind of trying to navigate that as well, is like, now that I know all of these things that create me, it is hard for me to pull apart, like, who would I be personality wise without this?